Well, hello everyone. First, I want to thank Camila and her team for having me on the World Teams Structures of Success webinar series. I'm really excited about this. Um, I'm I I want to speak a little bit today about really how I got to this point in my career and how I built up the business and some of the lessons that I've learned along the way. Also, if you have questions during the talk, like Camila said, you can put them in the chat, or you could raise your hand, whatever works for you. All right, so diving right in. 1 second. Whoops, sorry about that. A few fun facts about me. I love iced tea, so much so that I actually drink it when I exercise. I drink it instead of water when I exercise, which my family finds a bit odd, and it is. It's a bit odd, but I do love it. I also love the color green. The walls of my office are green. I'm often known to wear green, various shades of green. Another factor or thing about myself that my family tends to make fun of me for, but it's just who I am. So I want to start off by saying that really my professional identity has evolved since I started my companies. I really I don't know if you noticed it when I introduced myself, I said that I was a business owner and entrepreneur first, because I really feel like that is what I've become, and really what's really important. I also then follow that up with I'm an architect. I'm a certified access specialist, or also known as a CASP in California. And what that is we do ADA consulting services for accessibility compliance, code compliance requirements. So I worked with other architects and developers to help them on their projects. And more recently, I got into developing affordable housing, real estate development. And so we've been in business now for 6 years. Well, almost. In November it'll be our 6-year anniversary. We're continuing to find ways to grow the business. And we're also, though, really trying to focus on our mission, making sure that we're carrying out our goal to create more community focused, accessible, and inclusive housing. For the past 6 years, we have been working in about 30 different cities, and we've been working on over 1,200 housing units. And not all of them have been built, but all of those projects have a construction value of over 400 million. So I often like to say that we're small, but we're mighty. And then diving into my professional career. So I really knew at a young age that I always wanted to be an architect. And I knew that I looked into that. Okay, what does it take to be an architect? And I started researching colleges, and I found that I ended up going to Carnegie Mellon University because it was very technical and engineering based. And I really tended to gravitate more towards the technical side of architecture and the systematic side of architecture. And so I really felt like it was a good fit for me. But as I've gotten older, it's really interesting. As I've become an adult and I've been in the architecture industry and world for so long, I've noticed that people's perception of what an architect doesn't always really align with at least the work that I'm doing. And so I spend a lot of time telling people that, I don't like to actually pick out the color of tiles in their kitchen, or, select door hardware for their home remodel. It's just not my interest. It's not the type of architecture I work on, but also I'm honestly just not very good at it. So, but I have been working in the industry now for 20 years. I have worked at some very large corporate firms. I've worked at Frank Gehry's office, Gehry Partners. I've followed that by working at Architectonica and then later Gensler. And so, having known that I always wanted to start my own architecture firm, when I was at each of these corporate places, I tried to make sure that while I was there, and gaining experience, I wanted to make sure that I learned tools and different knowledge that I could then later apply to my own firm. So while I was at Gehry Partners, I really tried to study and understand how to push the boundaries of design and technology. And that was a great place to do that. Then when I had moved on to Architectonica, I really focused on how do you build a building? How do you put things together? As you're learning as an architect and you're growing, you're trying to kind of figure these things out. So Architectonica gave me a great opportunity to learn how to put a building together and also how to manage a team, which was really helpful. And then last, when I started to get closer to being ready, emotionally and mentally ready to start my own practice, when I was at Gensler, I was there for about 2 years. I had really looked at their marketing and sales department and how they do the things. Gensler is the largest and most successful, profitable architecture firm in the world. So I was like, why? I wanted to just understand why and how I could kind of use tools, different things there to then apply it to my business. And so today, I think we want to really focus on 4 key lessons in terms of growing a business, whether it's architecture, whether it's real estate, whether it's medical, whatever business you're in, there's some kind of general standard lessons and tools and knowledge to gain to run a business. And some important things are marketing and branding. For us, another way in which we grew was looking at diversification and offering different services, also learning how to delegate and seeking advice. So getting a little bit more into my journey, my personal journey. After being in the corporate world for a while, I did decide that it was time to start my own practice. And I actually remember the moment when I decided to leave Gensler. I was in Spain on a vacation with my husband, just was leisure vacation. And I just had this feeling that I was like, wow, time is fleeting. And I've got this one life as far as I know to live. And I've got these goals I want to accomplish. Like the time is now. And so as soon as we got back from that vacation, I quit my 9 to 5 and I just started my own firm. I went in head first. Like I didn't slowly build it up like on the side and do the whole moonlighting thing. And so that's how Design with Skill started. It does sound abrupt, but like I look back and I realized that really it had been almost a decade in the making. I had been planning and learning and accumulating the tools and knowledge, like I mentioned, that I needed to start, basically to just start the business. And, really looking back to when I was at college, I thought afterwards that I was going to be working on some arts and cultural projects. And that was just what I was interested in at the time. And it's really there's a lot of design liberties that go into those projects. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. So then when I moved out to California, I oh,
sorry about that.
no problem. Not a problem at all. I thought someone was asking a question. That's why I paused, but
No.
So when I had
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no problem. So when I had got to Gary Partners, they're very arts and culture based, and I had worked on a Guggenheim Museum in Abu Dhabi. It was an amazing experience. I loved it. But later on, a few years later, I was actually put on a multifamily tower. It was part of the Brooklyn Nets Arena, which is very cool, very great project. I loved it. But I was really surprised how much I enjoyed multifamily. I had never considered it. And then as my career progressed and I moved from, various companies, I moved from Gary Partners, then to Architectonica. I continued to work on multifamily projects and I was like, okay, this is great. I love this. And the project here on the left, you can see this Lumina Towers. This is a project up in San Francisco, one of the first projects I worked on at Architectonica. And I love this project. It's a high-rise, high-end luxury condo project in San Francisco, like I mentioned. And but I remember towards the end of the project when we were under construction and just about to get our C of O, or certificate of occupancy, I remember reading an article. There was an article that was published, and it was about the penthouse of the building and how it was going to be the most expensive condominium ever to be on the San Francisco market. And I had a visceral reaction to that article, and it wasn't a good one. I was very, very proud of the building. I was like, oh, I love this building. I love the team that I was working with. I thought the client was great, everything, the contractor, such a great experience. But I really felt a little sick to my stomach. And I think it was because at the time I remember being like, why do I feel this way? And it dawned on me that I had gone into architecture because I really wanted to make a difference in our built environment and do something that helps the masses. And I just felt like I wasn't really doing that here. And so at that point, I decided I needed a change. And after that, I ended up later moving on to Gensler. And while I was at Gensler, you can see the project here on the right. This was a project I worked on at Gensler. This project was a government project. It was for the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. It was administration offices, but it really felt rewarding because like, oh, I'm working on a government project. It's to help the masses. It's for the LA County Department of Mental Health. It felt like it just felt very rewarding. But oddly enough, I realized it also didn't quite feel like the right fit. Like it was a little ironic. I was like, wait, I'm finally doing what I thought I wanted to, but it doesn't feel quite right. And but I wasn't sure exactly what it was. And then one day I ended up getting a call from my old boss at Architectonica. We had left on really good terms, which is another thing I recommend. Always, don't burn bridges. Keep your relationships, keep your work relationships, and stay on good terms with everyone. And so I had a call with my old boss. He was just calling, catching up, seeing how I was doing. And I was mentioning how, I missed working with him, but I love my new team. But I also told him, I was like, I'm really surprised because I actually really miss multifamily projects. Like it dawned on me, I was like, wow, I think this is my life's calling. Like I think I'm supposed to be doing multifamily work, but I'm supposed to be doing it for underserved communities. And so it was really at that moment that I realized, okay, I this is what I need to do. And I need to find a way to do this for the rest of my life, or hopefully for the rest of my life. So then after that, I'm going to move on to the next slide. After that, I started my own company, and I wasn't really 100% confident. Like I said, I knew I wanted to do multifamily. That was my life's calling, but I wasn't really sure how to do that. I started the company, and to begin with, I just kind of took the approach of, okay, we're going to market ourselves as we're an architecture firm. We do everything for anyone. And at the beginning, you kind of felt like I had to do that because I just was trying to get work, bring in clients. And so I did some small scale home remodels. And I did a few feasibility analysis studies for multifamily properties, but I found that it just wasn't the right fit for me. I couldn't do that much longer. So I started to really look back at my career and say, okay, what tools can I use? Like, what can I use to actually get at the work that I want, get the clients that I want, these multifamily developers. And so I actually started drawing from those past experiences. Specifically, I looked at, when my time at Gensler, we did a lot of networking. And so I was like, I'm going to start going to these networking events. Urban Land Institute, ULI, is a big one. It's a large industry networking group. And so they put on a lot of events. So I started going to those. Crew LA, that's Crew is for real estate professionals, specifically targeted women, but men are also allowed to be part of this. Went to Crew Biz Now. So I went to a few different events, and it was while I was there that I started developing these relationships and started kind of working on my skills to network and talk about my business and talk about what I'm trying to do and try to find other industry professionals that are aligned with me and that are looking to partner, or we're looking for architects to work with them on their projects. And then I actually got my first multifamily client when I went to an RFP pre-bid conference for LA County. And for those of you who don't know what that is, RFP is the request for proposal. It's a public process in order to work on government projects. And so I had gone to this conference, this pre-bid conference, to talk about that project. And I ended up meeting another developer there. And while we didn't partner on that specific, the public project, he's like, hey, I have this other property. I've been looking for an architect. You sound like you might be a good fit. Let's see where this goes. And so it was through that experience, just going to that conference, that I found my first clients. And he he took a he took a chance on me. The first project was a small 15 units, micro units. They were 300 square feet each, modular, which is kind of cool, a modular project, um, modular construction. And we ended up working on that for quite some time. It was great. I really had a great experience with that. But through that and gaining that confidence and kind of figuring out how to market myself and sell myself as a multifamily expert really helped me to grow the business. As you can see on the screen here, I have two architecture projects that we've since been working on, about 50 units, each of them, condominium and apartments. We also do 100% affordable. And so, as many of you know, the housing crisis in California, and the whole nation for that matter, it's pretty, we have a supply issue. We don't have enough housing. It's making housing very unaffordable. And so there's a lot of laws and a lot of policies and regulation that's happening in order to promote and to encourage affordable housing development. And so we've kind of started learning ourselves about that, and then really positioning ourselves as an expert in affordable housing development. But through that, I mentioned the RFP earlier and how we had gone to that RFP meeting, and that's how I found my first clients for multifamily. But then it dawned on me, I was like, well, when I was at Gensler, I worked on that government project. That was an RFP. Let me start going after some RFPs myself. And so then I ended up, I do consistently pursue RFP projects, and one that I'm pretty proud of and that we're continuing to do, another partner, an individual that I found through a ULI event. We've developed a partnership over the years. We actually have been working on ADU affordable housing projects. And we partner with cities, City of Pasadena, West Hollywood, more recently Long Beach. And we work on these programs that allow homeowners or property owners to add an ADU, which stands for accessory dwelling unit, on their property. And through that, they're given a low interest rate loan to build it, as well as help from us to help throughout the whole process, the construction process. And then in exchange, they rent it to a Section 8 voucher holder or a low income tenant. And so it's been really rewarding, and I've loved working with the cities and creating these public-private partnerships. But what I learned through all this is, had I not really drawn from my past experience and looked at what I had, what I did when I was at Gensler and going through these government processes and attending these networking events, I really wouldn't be where I am today. And so, as I mentioned, some of the public-private partnerships that we've developed with the City of West Hollywood and Pasadena, Long Beach. We've also developed some private partnerships as well with some large firms. AECOM's a very large contractor. And I've done that by really tapping into my full network and my past colleagues, and they've kind of worked with me and they're helping me out. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind. Look at your network, look who can help you. Always be open to the possibility of collaboration, because it can be really helpful and it can bring in new opportunities. All right, so diving a little bit deeper into the 4 key lessons that I mentioned earlier. Just a reminder: marketing and branding, diversification, delegation, and seeking advice. So I think first off, in terms of marketing and branding, really when I started off, I didn't like the idea of investing in marketing. I guess I didn't really understand the value of marketing at the time too. And so, but I knew I needed to do it. And my husband is actually in marketing. So he's like, what do you mean you're not going to market yourself? And I was like, I just feel like, you just talk to people, you get referrals, word of mouth. And he's like, no, you've got to put yourself out there. And so I started trying to educate myself more on how do I do that. And so I first read the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And it was extremely inspirational because it really helped me realize that we need, you need to, especially if you want to have a long-term business, sustainable business, you really need to understand why you're doing it and the message that you're conveying to the world about your business and the value that you're providing. And so that book really helped me kind of define, understand what I was doing and doing it in a very concise and simple way. And that kind of got into branding and marketing as well. So we've been focusing a lot lately on our brand identity. I actually have Camila to thank for this because we're working with WorldTeams. Both my assistant, Cindy, is from WorldTeams. And also more recently this month, we've hired Jimena, another wonderful individual who's a marketing expert. And so we're investing more in our marketing, working on our brand identity, and we're starting to really look at different what I'm calling traction channels and or marketing campaigns. And not only are we just looking at developing those, but we're also looking at how they're effective. So how are we measuring them? Are we getting the results that we need? So all of those things, we're kind of doing a full analysis, has been really helpful. And I'm very excited about where things are going. Also on this inspirational book list, and getting into that, how I mentioned the traction, the book Traction by Gabriel Weinberg is another one that I've recently started reading and kind of using it for some tools to learn about various different marketing methods and what they call traction channels. And there's some in there that I had not even considered before. And so, and it's interesting. I really highly recommend, that book, as well as Start With Why. Any of the books that I have listed here, I recommend all of them because they're very helpful in terms of thinking about, your marketing, your brand, how you can actually develop your company and the message that you send. And then, going on from branding and marketing, when I was about a year into the business, I hit a point that I felt like we were just kind of stalled out. And I was like, how do I grow? Like, I just didn't feel really comfortable with it, but I didn't know enough about how can I, get more market share, or how can I grow things? And I looked at a bunch of different things. Now, I've been bootstrapping my business. I don't really feel comfortable taking on a lot of debt or doing a lot of fundraising. So I've decided that that was kind of the approach I was going to take. That's not for everybody. And I will say, if you choose to go that way, it's very challenging. Bootstrapping is very difficult, and it can take a long time. But that's what I chose to do. So I was like, okay, well, I don't plan on fundraising or going into debt. So how can I grow in other ways? And I really started I looked at different things like franchising at one point. I was like, can I develop a franchise business? Can we look at doing like maybe a software product that's related? But then I was like, that's going to be a whole business in and of itself. And so I kind of landed on, after reading more and kind of educating myself on different ways to grow a business, I landed on diversification of services. And the way that I did that is, I looked at, okay, well, what do we offer? We currently offer architecture services for multifamily. Then I was like, well, let's start getting more into the affordable housing side of things. So we started offering consulting services as well, that starts getting into applying either code or regulations specific to affordable housing. Also, funding for affordable housing is a bit different than for a private development. And so we started helping and consulting on that as well. We've also consulted, as I mentioned, I'm a certified access specialist. So ADA compliance, the American Disabilities Act, we consult for that as well. And then more recently, real estate development. Now, it all sounds a bit disparate. Like, we've got these different businesses, but they really all work together, and they still meet our mission to bring more community focused and inclusive housing into our environments. So we really, we found that diversification and looking at different services that we can offer has really helped us to grow over the years too. Then after diversification, something that I've really struggled with a lot, and again, I have Camila and WorldTeams to thank for this, is delegation. So delegation for me, it's funny. When I worked at the corporate firms, Gary Partners and Gensler and Architectonica, I didn't have trouble delegating. It felt relatively kind of straightforward and easy. But I realized when you have your own firm, it's different. You feel a different investment. And so I think it took me some time to kind of get comfortable with delegating within my own business, hiring the right people, the right experts. I just mentioned to you guys that we're almost in business for 6 years, and just now we're hiring a marketing expert. So we're a little late to the game, I will say. It really, I do recommend, delegating, hiring the right people, delegating sooner rather than later. It will help you to grow faster if that's your goal, if your goal is to grow faster. So, but I think some of the things I've learned about delegating is really kind of first and foremost, removing my ego. Like, you always have this idea that we're going to do it best. And, it's hard. We live in our heads and we see the way that we do things and we have expectations. And I've just learned that I really have to kind of let go of that and let other people, take the reins and let them run with what it is that what their role is, and let them run with it. And my job is to kind of give them a structure or framework to work within, to make sure that they're meeting the goals of the company and the mission, but that they can kind of run with things. And I found kind of different small tools along the way. I do, check-ins and stuff, but I like to give people as much autonomy as possible. And what I've learned is when I do that, when I give, staff or people that work with me, partners, when I give them that autonomy, they come up with stuff that much better than what I would come up with. And so I've learned over time that if you delegate and you really focus on, doing it in a way that gives people power and gives people, an investment in the work that they're doing, that you'll get a great result in the end. So, but it's taken me some time. Like I said, it's taken me quite a while. I'm a little bit of I'd say a slow starter in the delegation world. So, and then, last but not least, I had mentioned seeking advice. And so I do want to just wrap up by saying that it's really important to look at your network, to look at people who've been in your life, whether it's professionally or even friends and family, for advice in terms of your business and growth. So when I first started, or when I was first thinking about starting my business, I actually had reached out to my dad. My dad he was a small business owner for decades. We are not in the same industry, but I figured, well, he's got to know a thing or two. He's been around the block. And I remember when I first spoke with him, I had said, I'm a little scared. And he said, well, yeah. He's like, most people have these goals in life. A lot of them maybe to start their own businesses, and they're never gonna do it because they never get past that fear. He's like, but if you don't actually try, and you at least even try to fail, he goes, if you're better off trying to fail than not trying at all, because you're never going to succeed. You're never going to have anything unless you at least try. And those were just enough of inspiration for me to kind of make that leap and say, okay, I can do this. He's given me the confidence to be like, you just got to give it a shot. And so I think, you never know where good advice is going to come from. And that's why I wanted to use my dad as an example, because not even in a related industry, but I was like, well, he's a small business owner. He's got and that was really helpful for me. And then more recently, as I mentioned, we're starting to get into real estate development. I had actually reached out to somebody that I admire, this developer, architect turned developer, Kevin Kavanaugh from Guerrilla Development. And I remember reaching out thinking, oh, he'll never take a call with me. He's too busy. And he was happy to. And we had this great conversation, and he gave me some wonderful tips and advice. And I remember being shocked that he was okay with, just talking with me and kind of, asking me about my experience and then telling a little bit about his. And to me, it was shocking. And then I realized, well, wait, he's a business owner too. Like, he's also knows that you never know where a new opportunity may come. And so you've got to be open-minded, and you've got to really think about that as you're communicating with other people in the world and your professional network. And so it kind of dawned on me. I was like, oh, he's doing exactly what I'm trying to do here. And so again, I just really think it's important to keep that in mind, the networking, seeking out advice, even in places where you don't think you may get advice from professional advice. And so that's those are really generally my 4 key lessons and some things that I've learned over these past 6 years. But I wanted to close out with a few quotes. I tried to get as many female quotes in here as possible, just to kind of balance things out a bit. And so my first one with Ruth Bader Ginsburg: fight for those things that you care about, but do in a way that will lead others to join you. And so I think that whole start with why, finding your passion, but then developing those tools to figure out how you're going to get people to follow you. And do you, and also aligning yourself with people that have that same mission. Another big one, Eleanor Roosevelt: never allow a person to tell you no who doesn't have the power to say yes. And so I've learned that one the hard way, because unfortunately there's been a few people that I thought were decision makers and in fact were not. And so I've learned early on, figure out who those decision makers are and focus on those. Don't focus on anyone else, because they're going to say no, but it doesn't really matter, to be honest. And then there's nothing quite so useless as doing with great efficiency something that should not be done at all. Another one I'm guilty of. I very much at times have put forth a lot of effort and energy into the wrong things and the wrong tasks. And I think as you grow business, you will learn that, you start working more on your business and less like in the business itself. And you have to get comfortable with that. And that can take some time. And then Condoleezza Rice: people who end up first don't actually set out to be first. They set out to do something that they love. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. At times we just go out there and we're like, if you're passionate and you really care about something, you're going to try really hard. And if you keep trying and you don't give up, you most likely will get to a really, you'll become successful. But if your goal is just to become successful, it's probably not going to work without that passion and that desire. And then last, I threw in this quote that I've been using more recently. If you choose it wisely, time, it is your greatest gift, but don't squander it on people, work, or activities that don't serve your goals. So really, I think it's really smart to kind of look at the time, how you're using it, and think about if it's really providing value for you and your business. So that's my presentation. I want to thank everybody for coming. I really would love to, open up to questions, or if nobody has any questions, if there was any topics that you kind of just wanted to discuss that resonated with you, I'd be happy to talk more about that.
Well, thank you so much, Sam. This was awesome. And, you're such an inspiration. It's not easy to do this switch, from working at an office to starting your own business. So, we talk with a lot of architects, a lot of principals, a lot of business owners, a lot that did that same jump, some that are working in studies, and one thing that I see as a common factor that most struggle is that obviously you're architects, right? So you like to work on projects, right? And so the two first points, the marketing and the networking, almost feels unnatural for a lot of people. But as you said, it's definitely a key factor for any business, but especially in architecture, I find, because you usually, if you're like a small practice, you don't work on 100 projects. You work on 2, 3, 4, 5 max at the time, right? And so that means your eggs are not very diversified, let's say. So when you don't have those projects lining up, or you're just too focused on the project, so you forget about networking again, that makes your business essentially very vulnerable. And so, at the beginning, out of necessity, when you don't have a business, people go and do the things that you do. Go to events, do the efforts. But then they're working on the projects, they have their projects, they forget about it because it feels unnatural. So my question is, how much of your time, being that last thing that you mentioned on your quote, do you actually dedicate to marketing and networking on a like more steady basis, if you had to say?
I actually have been tracking that, and I've been tracking that for a few years now. I do that through my calendar, and I've previously was about doing it 25% of the time. So exactly as you mentioned, Camila, I fell into that trap. I did networking, I got projects in, but then you kind of get stuck and you're like just focusing on that. And I did that too. And so I do a little bit of marketing here, a little bit of networking here. But over this past year, I've definitely increased the efforts, and I've been doing about 50-50 now. So I spend a lot more time on my marketing efforts, business development. So not even just marketing. I would say also business developments like operations systems, putting things in place to make it easier to grow, and to scale a business. Because I'll be honest, I work a lot less on actual projects. And I've found that I prefer that. It takes some time, I think, to transition to that. And that's not to say that, if you have an architecture firm and if that's what you want, that's fine. I have a local architect here that I know that I partner with on projects, and they're small. It's just two of them. They've been doing it for years. And I remember them saying to me, well, people have always said we missed our opportunity because we chose not to scale. We chose not to hire more people and to grow. But we're happy with that. And I was like, that's fine. If that's what you want to do and you want to just bring in projects and keep working. But if you want to scale, it's impossible for you to do that all, to work on projects, to grow the business. And as I mentioned, like you're the most invested in your business. As the business owner, you care the most about it in a way that other people will not. And so you need to understand, like, you're growing a business and you're not, you're no longer, like I said, I had an identity shift. I'm no longer an architect. I'm a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. So
Nice.
I've shifted quite a bit, and I really will only work on projects now if it's a dire necessity, like if something happens. But generally I'm out, I'm using, I don't want to say using, but I'm working with my team members and they're doing the work on the projects, and I'll have oversight, but that's, yeah. So I'd say
That's
right now it's about 50% for marketing, and then I have another 25% for operations, and sales. And then I'll say that last 25% is probably working on actual projects and kind of going through, but it's definitely evolved over time. So
that's fantastic. I think that explains your growth. I think if I asked that same question to a lot of people, that those would not be the percentages. Anyways,
it's uncomfortable to make that transition, especially because like you think it's what I learned. For me, it's so much wrapped up in identity. Like it's like my identity was, I'm an architect, this is what I do, I need to be drawing and designing buildings. And then I thought back to when I worked at Frank Gehry's office. He'd come into the office. We'd have to work on Saturdays because that was the day he wasn't traveling or having meetings. And we'd work on design then. And he'd look at a few things and he gave some like pointers, like, oh, let's change that, let's do that. And that was him working on projects. Like everybody else that he hired, the experts that he hired, the designers that he hired, they were doing the work. And I remember just thinking that, like, that's what it takes to be super successful and have those businesses. You're building a business. You're not building buildings anymore. It's just what it is. So
yeah, totally. Anyone else have questions? Don't be shy. Well, people are shy, I guess.
no more questions. I mean, I will say for me, I look back now, the other thing I'd recommend doing is, as you're growing and you're trying to find ways to grow, looking at different resources. I've also I've taken different courses along the way too. So I try to find either affordable or cheap courses about entrepreneurship, growing. I took one through Cornell. It was specifically women's entrepreneurship, but even just that alone helped me and gave me some tips in terms of growth and, some simple things that, because it was so women, it was focused on women and kind of some of the challenges that women face. I was like, okay, well, let me use this as kind of my advantage. So I also ended up going and getting a certification for a women-owned business. And that I have found has actually helped me get some work in as well, because it's another way that I can, um, differentiate myself in a predominantly male market. So, I mean, even finding small things like that, along the way, finding these little nuggets of information, or nuggets of tools that can help you to grow your business and kind of differentiate yourself from others can be helpful.
Yes, yes, we've had a lot of clients that either have done it or are super interested in doing it because it opens up doors for sure. Like even some big companies are required to have
They
minorities
are.
and so on. And like, so that's the a nice little badge to get you into it.
Exactly. It's helpful. I mean, and that it's finding out those little things that help. I mean, those are, I'd say, kind of I'd say the extras in terms of growing the business. That's not really the focus of growing your business, but all those little things can kind of help and add up and to bring in more work. But really overall, like I say, you want to really think about that, diversifying the services, delegating is just so key, and hiring people for the various roles. When I first started, I was doing my own bookkeeping. I did hire, when I first started, I had a lawyer. And because I knew, I was like, I can't do that. That's too complicated. I had a lawyer and I had a tax accountant, two things that were just way too complicated. So I hired, and I remember talking to my tax accountant. She's like, okay, well, give me your P&L, give me your balance sheets. Like, let me see everything. And I was like, my what? And she was like, wait, you don't have that? And I was like, well, and I was doing everything myself, all my accounting stuff, and I was doing a horrible job at it. And then she's like, you've got to hire somebody. And so that's when I went out and I hired a bookkeeper, I hired an accountant. And, I think just kind of realizing you don't know what you don't know, and seeking out people who are experts or who do know what you don't know is just going to benefit you long term. But being strategic, another book that I had listed was The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And that book I think is really great because it makes you think about kind of a business and the goal of business in general, no matter what industry you're in. The whole point of a business is it should be profitable at some point. You're trying to add value, but at what point is it no longer a business, or it's just kind of a hobby if you're not making any money?
Yeah.
All these things you have to consider. So in doing that, thinking about, okay, well, where am I going to put my resources? Where am I going to put my money, my profits to grow things? So being really strategic about it, I think, is important too. I think that's why it's taken me a long time to really invest in marketing. We've been kind of puttering along and doing okay, but now I've realized, well, if I want to go to the next level, I have to invest more. It's just what it is. So we've looked at really kind of restructuring things and putting in resources into different areas to take things to the next level. So
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I come from a marketing background, so that came very natural to me. Like sales and marketing was the first thing that I did, right? And I see other companies that do what we do, that provide staffing services for architecture firms in US, but um, they're owned by architects, so they want to control the projects. They want to do a good job at doing the projects, and I'm not an architect, so I don't care. I'll just focus on giving you a good person, and you can tell me if they work or not, right?
yep.
And so my ignorance has been bliss in that
Yes.
sector. I just don't understand. People tell me this and that, and I'm like, I don't understand what you say. But fantastic. And yeah, and on a country like I think that marketing, you know, it can be a complicated science because you're basically trying to tap into someone's desires and someone's like the thing that they want or the thing that drives them or whatever, like to pay attention when there are 1,000 things bombarding them, and to pay attention to you. So it is a little bit of a science, but I'd say, like, when it comes to business, even if even if you suck at it, just being consistent is
Yeah.
good enough. Just putting yourself out there consistently, even if it's just your logo out there, like no sign, like that will bring in things.
Yep.
So that's why, like, 50% of your time, it's a very good answer, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned that it took me a while it took me a long time to get to that point, but you do realize at some point you're like, well, I'm never going to get to the next level of where I want to be without doing that. And I tend to have a little bit of a perfectionist personality where I'm like, and so to your point, like just being consistent and getting it out there, even if it's not great, makes a difference. And so, I mean, I still struggle with this. I'm sure if you asked Cindy or or any of my other team members, they'd be like, yeah, she's constantly like telling me, okay, we'll change this and do this and do this. And I'm like, I'm missing, like, just put it out there, just put it out there in the world. And it's better than everything being perfect. And so I've had to kind of learn that as well. And so it's hard. That goes against my nature. To your point about yourself, like you're like, well, you don't care about architecture because you're an architect. And so I've learned I have to care less about it. And even I've
Yes.
had I really do. And I've had some clients basically tell me that. They're like, this doesn't matter. Like, what matters is, like, at the end of the day, my clients care about making money. Like, I hate to, that's just the reality. They want they want a project that's efficient, that's, yes, it looks good and the design is good, but they want to make sure that they're getting a return, and they've got so many things they've got to balance. Like, they're, dealing with regulations and permitting and getting financing. And so all of these things. So for them, they're like, these are my goals. And so I've also learned, I'm like, I need to understand what my clients' goals are and make sure that I'm delivering that for them. And so they do want good design, but that honestly is a very small subset
Part
or
of it. Yeah.
importance for them. And so you just kind of have to understand it. Where the architecture world, especially, I feel like schooled, really does the industry a disservice in the sense that there's so much focused on design and the value of design. And honestly, while I do agree that there's a lot of value in design, I think that architects tend to forget that there's a lot more to the built environment than just the design. And so I think kind of figuring all of that out and balancing it and delivering, like giving a client that, giving them more than just like, oh, we have this great design, is huge. And that's how I've learned that I've got repeat clients or recommendations and referrals and all of that, is because, okay, we're not just selling ourselves as, oh, we design good buildings. Like, we talk about the process that we go through and dealing with regulatory agencies and finding ways to make things cheaper, dealing with supply issues, like all of these things we help with. And I think that makes a huge difference for our clients. So
Yeah.
I do see a question in the chat. And are you involved with the metrics, or how do you set your goals marketing wise? So for the metrics, there a book that I had also listed on there, Measure What Matters. I'd recommend that one too. It talks about various things like KPIs, key performance indicators. And so we've been looking at things right now. Like, okay, for instance, I've got a newsletter. My newsletter, we have about 3,000 subscribers, 3,200. And that was like handcrafted over the years. I've picked various people that I've known throughout my career, colleagues, industry professionals. And with the newsletter, we check performance, we check things like, click rates, opens, all that stuff. But then for us, like, that's what I've been measuring. And now that we've hired the marketing expert, we're trying to take it to the next level to see, okay, well, what about like conversion? So just because we have these people looking at our stuff, how is that converting to projects for us? And so we are, like I said, there's various things you can measure, but we're trying to, even at this point, define specific metrics that we're going to start measuring. And you can do that through like your website, a lot of digital platforms, even sales. We've considered like various things like, cold calling, which we haven't got into yet, or other channels, other things like, what was I going to say? I mean,
LinkedIn, maybe more outreach.
social like media, all of these things. So we're doing, and we're looking at that, and we're going to start measuring them regularly and seeing what the performance, what it indicates. And then also, but not just measuring what's there currently, but giving ourselves goals, like what we're trying to hit and what we're trying to achieve. So
Yeah, amazing. Well, does anybody have any other questions? No. Okay. Well, Sam, it was so amazing to have you here. Thank you so much for this presentation and for
Thank you
sharing.
so much, Sam.
thank you. I really
Yes.
appreciate it. This was really fun. This was really fun for me. It was a great experience. So thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you
for
so
sharing.
much. And I mean, I don't know this 100%, but like just but we spoke a little bit to Cindy when she came down for the event, and
Mhm.
she just explained how you set all your internal processes, and like even how you organize, so that she helps you to create the plan sheets and the plan sheets and everything. And I think you also, one of the key factors of your success, like looking from outside, is how you're able to take something kind of complicated and intricate and like divide it into something simple with steps and good processes. So I think there's a lot of that too.
Thank you. That's great to hear. It's so nice to hear from outside. You don't know. Like sometimes you're just going along, you're doing something like, I hope this is working. So that's really great to hear. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Thank you again. And thank you all for coming and joining. Thank you for your time, and love to see you here. Bye bye.